The Battle of Camarón is a famous event that happened on April 30, 1863, during the French intervention in Mexico. It took place in Camarón de Tejeda, Veracruz, Mexico. A small group of soldiers led by Captain Jean Donjo and Lieutenants Clement Mordit and Jean Villan, totaling just 65 men, were attacked by a much larger force of up to 3,000 Mexican infantry and cavalry. The small group had to defend themselves at a nearby place called Hacienda Camarón. Despite being greatly outnumbered, the soldiers of the Legion refused to surrender and fought bravely, causing significant casualties to the enemy before eventually being overwhelmed. This battle has become famous for its display of bravery and a never-give-up attitude despite overwhelming odds. During the Second French intervention in Mexico, a French army led by General Faury was besieging the Mexican city of Puebla. The 1st and 2nd Battalions of the Legion, commanded by Colonel Pierre Jean Ingros, had arrived in Veracruz on March 26. The 2nd Battalion, led by Major Munier, was assigned to protect a road from Tejeria to Soledad, while the 1st Battalion protected the road further to Chiquihuite. In support of the siege, the French sent a convoy under the command of Captain Jacques Cabossel, which carried 3 million francs in gold bullion, siege guns, and ammunition in 60 wagons. 2 companies of fusiliers were supposed to escort the convoy from La Soledad to Chiquihuite. However, Jean Ingros sent the 3rd Company of the 1st Battalion to reinforce the convoy guard after receiving information from Indian spies that the Mexicans were planning to ambush the convoy. As the company had no officers, Captain Jean Donjo, Adjutant Major of the 1st Battalion, volunteered to command it. Sous-Lieutenants Napoleon Villan and Clement Mordit also volunteered to join him. 6 miles northeast of Camarón was La Joya, the headquarters of Colonel Francisco de Paula Milan's Center Brigade, consisting of National Guard troops from Córdoba, Jalapa, Coscomatepec de Bravo, Veracruz, as well as dragoons and lancers. On April 30th, at 1 o'clock, the 3rd Company of 62 Legionnaires and 3 Legion officers were traveling from Chiquihuite to Palo Verde, which was 6 hours and 22 miles away. By 5:45, they reached Camarón and the La Trinidad Hacienda, which had 50-meter-long walls forming a square, with a 2-story ranch house on the north and an abandoned open stable on the south. They reached Palo Verde as planned by 7 o'clock and started preparing their morning coffee. However, around 8 o'clock, they spotted Mexican cavalry, led by Captain Tomas Alganzana's Cutaxtla squadron of 250 rancheros, heading southeast from the north. The Legionnaires continued southward, passing the road about half a mile away. Donjo, the Legionnaires' leader, decided to move his men back west, along the forest north of the road, to the hacienda's 10-foot walls, seeking a more defensible position. Meanwhile, Milan, the Mexican commander, realized that he must eliminate Donjo's men before they could discover the size of his forces and their planned ambush of the convoy. Milan sent his dragoon squadron and 4 infantry battalions to join Alganzana's lancers. Donjo's plan was to draw the Mexican forces away from the convoy, and the Legionnaires reached the hacienda by 9 o'clock. Donjo then decided to proceed west on the road towards Paseo del Macho, but soon discovered Alganzana's cavalrymen north of the road. He ordered his men to form a hollow square and charged in 2 columns. The Mexicans were stopped by rifle fire from the Legionnaires' square and withdrew, allowing the 3rd Company to fall back to the cactus-filled ditch on the south side of the road and make their way back to the hacienda. However, on the way, 16 of Donjo's men were captured, and another Mexican cavalry charge swept around the south side of the hacienda. The Legionnaires faced the 2nd charge with rifle fire from their square, forcing the Mexicans to retreat. Upon reaching the hacienda, the Legionnaires were surprised to find Mexicans occupying the ranch house. Milan arrived with the dragoons around the same time the bullion convoy headed back to La Soledad after being warned of the 3rd Company's difficulties. Captain Donjo then urged his men to take an oath to fight to the death rather than surrender and made them swear their loyalty on his wooden hand. He shared his bottle of wine with them and encouraged them with brave words. Milan sent Captain Ramon Lane to negotiate surrender, but Donjo replied that he had plenty of ammunition and would continue to fight. At about 11 o'clock, the Mexicans charged the gateways on the west end of the hacienda and breached the south side. Donjo was hit in the chest and soon died, and Lieutenant Wieland took command. Casualties mounted on both sides, but the Legionnaires faced challenges of thirst, heat exhaustion, and sunstroke due to lack of water and food. Their mules had run off after the first encounter with the Mexican cavalry, and then Milan's center brigade infantry, consisting of 1,200 to 1,400 men, arrived at the hacienda. When Captain Lane offered the Legionnaires a second chance to surrender, Sergeant Vincent Morzicki responded with "Mid," echoing the spirit of Pierre Cambronne's famous last words at the Battle of Waterloo. After 4 hours of fighting, only 32 Legionnaires were still able to fight. By 1400 hours, that number had dwindled down to 20. At 1430, Lieutenant Wieland was killed and Lieutenant Mordet took command. By 1700 hours, the roof of the ranch house was burned down, and the Legionnaires were reduced to only 12 men. Colonel Milan ordered his men to leave the hacienda and offered the Legionnaires a third chance to surrender. In the next attack, several Legionnaires were captured, and by 1730, only Lieutenant Mordet's men remained in the stable. By 1800 hours, with no ammunition left, only 5 men, including Lieutenant Mordet, charged with bayonets in a last desperate attempt. 2 men were killed immediately, and the rest were surrounded. One Legionnaire, Victor Cato, sacrificed himself to protect Lieutenant Mordet and died in the Mexican barrage. Major Campos ordered the Legionnaires to surrender, and Corporal Felipe Main responded that they would only surrender if allowed to keep their weapons and equipment, and if their wounded lieutenant was taken care of. When Campos brought the remaining Legionnaires to Milan, he was amazed and exclaimed, "These are not men. They are demons."